Pakistan cricket at its best. 1 minute down, next minute up.
Thanks very much, everybody, for joining me once again. Sad Steak here for PakPassion, bringing you another exclusive interview. Delighted to be joined by an old friend of PakPassion's, somebody who's contributed to the website in terms of interviews and also posted on the website for many years. And it's always a pleasure listening to his views about coaching techniques, fast bowling, and his work that he's done over the years on fast bowling. And the feedback that we've been getting regarding Ian's interviews is very interesting, because I think people who are learning about the game, who play the game, they find the interviews very interesting. So it's great to have Ian back once again. Ian, hope you're doing well.
Yeah, I'm good, Sage. Thanks for having me on. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Ian, I mean, a little bit of background, because people are asking about what some of the work that you've done over the years, and I've just been doing a little bit of research, and you're widely recognised as a pioneer in fast bowling, blending biomechanics, science, and practical drills, at a time when not many people were using those methods. And I've just read something about the ABSAT system and the 4-10 pegs drill system as well. You transformed the way pace bowling was taught and understood, and now people are sort of catching up and utilizing some of the methods that you've been working with for many years.
Yeah, Saj, it's been one heck of a journey. If I'm really honest, I mean, my career ended in 1988. I retired a year early at the age of 27. I should have had another year at Essex, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do with myself. And I got into coaching, but the reason I got into the coaching side was that there was a spell between Nottinghamshire when I was a young lad, 19 years of age, and when I joined Essex. There was a 2-year gap. And I was only bowling myself around about 70 mid 70 miles an hour. And I went away. This is in the earlier 80s, and I'll come back to why it's relevant on the coaching. But I thought there's got to be a way to bowl faster. And almost by accident, I realized that if you think like a javelin thrower, and you imagine, a javelin thrower, they run up, I know they have a bent arm, but basically they have to launch something as far as possible. My thinking was, if we kind of did the javelin route, does that give us more speed with a straight arm? And that's where I started mentally. And I was a javelin thrower. I threw the javelin Olympic qualifying distance back in the day, and obviously pitched a baseball. So I kind of understood the biomechanics, but in layman's terms, I didn't know what that meant. I mean, I didn't understand the big phrases. So I had these 2 years, and my speed increased from 70 to high 80s. And the fastest I ever bowled, retro clocked back in the old school of doing it, was 93 miles an hour. So my speed had gone up about 18 miles an hour in a 2-year period, or over a 2-year period. And it came from changing my technique. Now, when I then started coaching this stuff in the early 1990s, I think I'm right in saying I was probably the only coach talking about technique, because we always said, oh, you're born a fast bowler. All the great bowlers say that, it's all natural, you got it or you haven't. And I understand athleticism to a point. But with most sports, it's all about technical aspect of it. How you hit a golf ball, for example, how you swim, how we even teach batting is very highly technical. There's not 1,000 ways to hit a cover drive. There's probably 1 or 2 ways. And what we were confusing style with structure. Structure is a technique. Style is how it looks when you do it. So if you imagine if we were all learning dance steps, we learnt the dance steps, but we actually look different when we dance, because we have a different style, a different way of doing it. And for me, fast bowling got very confused with itself, and it was trying to say that you can't teach style, which I agree with, but you can teach structure and you can teach technique. And I realized that a lot of bowlers were doing probably a lot of the same things incorrectly. By that I meant was, if you picked a perfect model and say, what does that look like? Forget the style. What do the positions look like? You then became like a golf pro. You became a tutor of another sport that actually was highly technical. Like when we throw a punch in boxing, there's a way you use your hips, there's a way you extend your arm. You don't just say to somebody, have a go at it and see how it feels, because you get smashed. And fast bowling for me, Saj, was the only, if I can call it a sport within a sport, was the only discipline within cricket that was totally not being taught. You know, it was just bowl the cricket ball, pitch it up. Well, my first question would be, how do you pitch it up? You know, you've got to bowl a bit quicker. Okay, how do you bowl a bit quicker? All of these things, I was fascinated. So when I started coaching, I think I was the first guy to start talking about a framework. And then people widely said, well, you can't teach the same thing to everybody. And I said, well, you can, because it's like a sat nav system, like a GPS. It guides you where you need to go. I mean, you might go off at a different route, but you end up on this road. So when it started, Saj, I know, sorry, long answer, but there's a lot to unpack there. People thought I was a bit crazy with it all. But if I fast forward to today, we know that people are now talking about keeping a front leg straight and where they release the ball from. So it's kind of gone a kind of 180 really, or more, almost a 360. But I came up with some phrases. You mentioned ABSAT. I should explain what that means in my world. It stands for Advanced Biomechanics Speed and Accuracy Training. And I thought, well, that's such a mouthful. I call it ABSAT. The reason I called it that, Saj, was that as soon as somebody started to use my phrases, I knew they were using my coaching methods. And also the 4 tent pegs, which are the 4 positions in the action: back foot landing, front foot landing, ball release, and follow through. They became like 4 tent pegs to hold the whole thing together. And in my simple mind, I was making it easy for everyone. And now, of course, biomechanics is backing it up. Science backs it up and says it's absolutely true.
Well, you know, Ian, when you were coming up with these innovations, I think people were looking at you as a bit of a maverick and as somebody who's not following the guidelines, who's not sort of using the traditional methods. And but now, I mean, your methods are being accepted worldwide, aren't they?
They are. And what's interesting, I mean, I have this phrase, gravity is gravity. I mean, you can call it something else, but it's basically gravity. And it applies to everybody. Or you might say, well, it's the force that keeps us on Earth, because I don't want to use the phrase gravity because Ian Pont called it gravity. So I don't want to call it that. And there was a lot of that going on, to be honest. So when I first came out with this stuff, I think it antagonized a lot of people. Well, actually, I think what it did was it challenged a lot of coaches. The coaches that said, oh, you're just born a fast bowler, you can't teach speed, you've got what you've got. And then I thought, well, surely we can teach people to jump higher, run faster, throw further. Why can't we bowl faster? Why can't we bowl with more control? There's got to be a way, there's got to be a structure that we can have. So, yeah, people were saying I was a maverick because I wasn't an international player myself, Saj. You know, had I been a big name fast bowler, I think they probably would have listened a bit more intently, and it would have probably elevated what I was doing a lot faster. And that's why it's taken, when we are literally talking 30 years ago. I mean, 1992, 93, I started coaching. We're 2025, you know, 33 years ago. And I still find myself having to explain it all to people. Because you can only change the world one person at a time. We are getting there, but whether they're going to use my phrases or not, I don't know. But I deliberately use the phrases to identify the movements within the action.
But do you feel vindicated now, Ponty, about your methods and your ideas when other coaches around the world, very high-profile coaches around the world, are sort of, you know, buying into your ideas?
Yes, I mean, it's a humbling thing, and I genuinely mean that. I mean, I've heard people in New Zealand and Australia, they work literally because they have my books. As you know, I've got 3 books, 2 of them specifically fast bowling. The Fast Bowler's Bible was written around the time I'm talking about, 10 years after I'd started, early 2000s. And then the follow up to that, Ultimate Pace Secrets, really had the skill drills in that you need to make the correction. I think for me, the breakthrough moment was probably the sports science brigade kind of saying all of these things you need to do to bowl faster. It very much looked like the 4 tent pegs. In fact, it was, I think George DeBell, who, you know, writes for The Cricketer and is a good friend of mine actually with ESPN Cricket Info, he made that observation. He said, all this stuff coming out of Loughborough now looks remarkably like Ian Pont's coaching from 30 years ago. So I think it's being accepted. The challenge that we've got, Saj, is that coach education doesn't teach coaches how to teach speed. I mean, I'm still and I can't believe I'm still relatively unique in the world to say if you want to learn how to bowl fast, go and see Ian Pont. You know, as you know, I work with Shoaib Akhtar, and he asked me that question: do you think I can bowl faster? He's the fastest bowler of all time, asking me if he can bowl faster. But he was curious about speed. And today, if you say speed bowling coach, I'm specifically using that phrase, who do you go to? I mean, there aren't coaches that teach speed, and we're still playing catch up with that.
You mentioned Shoaib Akhtar. You've also worked with the likes of Steyn and Deepak Chahar and the Afghan bowler Naveen-ul-Haq. I mean, how did you incorporate your methods when you were working with those guys, Ponty? And how did your methods sort of get the best out of those guys?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. Naveen, for example, I work with Naveen and I still work with him occasionally, but that's been over the last 6 or 7 years. We do it remotely. We've met a couple of times. I was physically there with Dale Steyn for 6 weeks when he first came to Essex and was bowling absolutely horrendously. He couldn't even land it almost, where he wanted to bowl it. He was all over the place. And then Shoaib, when I was bowling coach at Worcester, I was with him, had a couple of sessions with him. Deepak Chahar was when I was out in India, and he wasn't even in the Rajasthan team, let alone the IPL. But what was interesting is that each of those bowlers wanted to get something different from the coaching. Shoaib just wanted to bowl quicker. Dale Steyn needed more control. Deepak Chahar wanted to be one of the world's best new ball bowlers in T20 cricket in the power play, which he became. And Naveen wanted to have a box of tricks so that he could bowl his faster ball faster, and that meant his slower ball was relatively slower. So I think in a way, if you lay out a buffet to somebody and the whole menu is good, they're going to pick out the bits that they want. They might have everything if they're hungry, or they might have elements of it. But I think with those four bowlers, and there've been loads of others, as well. Obviously, Darren Goff and people like that, worked with him a little bit, and Ronnie Irani, and there's been loads of others. When I've been bowling coach of the Bangladesh, helped set up the national fast bowling stuff with Bangladesh as well. Tuskin Ahmed's come through on that. Have been some great bowlers, but people take out the bits that they want. So as long as you understand that the whole thing offers something to everybody, it's just working out the bits that you want to take.
Looking at some of the fantastic names and titles you've been given, Ponty: Face of Pace, the Grandfather of Speed. I don't know if
Keen on the grandfather bit.
Well, I was just going to say, you don't look old enough to be a grandfather, Ponty. I mean, those labels, surely that backs up what you've tried to achieve in your career.
Well, I agree with that. What I would say, I mean, if I go back sort of 10 minutes and said that I don't think there's a lot of competition, in the sense that I don't know where else you'd go to learn how to bowl fast. I mean, genuinely fast. It's not just about hurling it as hard as you can down the other end and falling over. It's about controlling it. You've still got to land in an okay area. And these days with big bats and T20, you're still going to have to do something in the air with it. So whilst specifically at the National Fast Bowling Academy, which I'm head of that, we teach speed, but we've got to teach the other bits that go with it. The box of tricks and the control and, the mindset stuff. We're talking about how players apply themselves under pressure. All of that has to happen as well. I mean, you can have the world's best looking bowling action, the world's best technical action, but you still got to bowl it. And my point has really been on the technical side. Anyone can bowl faster, because not everybody has a perfect bowling action. What they might do is they might get so far and be happy with it. Example, and he's just retired now, Chris Wokes, as an example. Chris Wokes' father, David Wokes, understands the 410 pegs. And I know that Chris has grown up with quite a technical head around the family, and I think that's brilliant. He's got a really nice bowling action. I mean, technically, he's probably got one of the best bowling actions in English cricket. It's very compact, it's easy, it's repeatable. He doesn't often get injured. But the thing about Chris is that his speeds are 87, 85 to 88, but he didn't actually want to push it any quicker. I think he could have probably become a 90-mile-an-hour plus bowler, because he only needed to find a little bit more. But he was very happy being that lively medium pace all-rounder, and he got a great career out of it. So I think he did the right thing. But I'm saying is he could have got more, even though he had a really good technical action. But there are a lot of bowlers. We talk about, Pakistani bowlers, and you can shake a tree and loads of fast bowlers fall out of it. They can still work on the technical part of it to increase their speed, and that's the bit Shoaib was really interested in. So I think it's relevant today. It's nice to have those titles, but ultimately, who do you go to get the information that you need?
One thing that always interests me is, Ponty, when boards announce their squads, there's a list of players, a list of coaches. There's usually more support staff than players in these
Yeah.
squads. Do you think, I mean, you've got fast bowling coaches, spin bowling coaches, this coach, that coach, batting coach. Do you think players these days are having their hands held a bit too much and being overcoached?
Um, yeah, I 100% agree with you. I think I'm going to pick up on the last phrase you used, overcoaching. I don't think there's any such thing as overcoaching. I just think there's the wrong coaching, because if you give people a good advice, you can't give them enough good advice, but you can give them one piece of bad advice. So I don't think it's an overcoaching. I think it's the wrong coaching. But I take your point. At that level, what are you I mean, what am I going to teach Jimmy Anderson if he was still playing? What am I going to teach Stuart Broad? You got 1,000 Test wickets between them. What am I doing to help them? And I think when you get to those levels, actually, you're wasted as a technical skills bowling. I'm a technical skills coach. What that means is that I'll be like a plumber. I come to your house and identify there's a fault and then fix the fault before I leave. Any good technical skills coach would say, you have this issue. Here's how you improve it. If you want to, I'll help you, and let's do it now. And we'll string it together. And by the time we finish, you'll be better. Is that what you want? Yes, that's what coaching is. Coaching to me is fault finding and fault correction. Now, most coaches don't do the second part. They just find fault. So they write this report and say, you're not doing this, 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 and this. And then they get in the car and drive off. But as a player, you think, well, how do I get more accurate? How do I get faster? How do I? And still, Saj, that coaching isn't there in fast bowling. It just isn't there. So I think at the levels you're talking about, the hand holding is definitely happening. I think it's more about, and this is why we see a lot of ex-players going straight from the changing room and then putting a tracksuit on and sitting on the bench, is that they put their arm around people, which is an important thing. We all want to be loved and hugged at the end of the day. But I think there's a lot of that kind of matey stuff going on, and not enough, how do I help you correct this problem to get better so that next time we learn from it and we don't make those mistakes again.
We get a lot of interest from young fast bowlers out there, Ponty, when you do these chats with me. And I mean, some of the work that you've done over the years, if there's one principle from your system that will outlast all formats and trends, what would that be?
I think this is going to sound really a strange thing to say. I think if you are curious as a player, you are halfway there. I always say, if I have to say to a fast bowler, you need to work on these things, and they don't understand it, one of us is wrong. Because a player should be self-aware and they should be curious about how to get better. And there's an English saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We say that all the time. But I would rather take the view that don't let success get in the way of improvement. So just because you're the best at what you do, wouldn't you like to be a bit better? And we know from Formula One car racing that each year the Formula One champion changes their car. They don't go out in the same car they won last year. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. They improve it. And we need to take lessons from other sports to say, if you stand still, you get run over. But a lot of players, they get to a point where they're just happy to just stay here. They're just happy. So I think something that transcends all generations is to say, can you be curious about how to get better? Because the moment we stop seeking improvement, I think we're lost to the game.
And finally, Ponty, I want to bring you to the topic of Haris Rauf, who's in the news at the moment. Really poor display in the Asia Cup final there, 3.4 overs north of 50. look, we know he has good and bad days. That's the name of the game when it comes to fast bowling in T20 cricket. How does a bowler balance that aggression, wanting to bowl fast with accuracy? Because I look at Haris Rauf and sometimes I think you're trying to bowl too fast and you're being hit all over the park. So, how does a bowler actually balance that out?
So you raised an interesting point. If you try to bowl fast, it actually stops you from doing it because the way to bowl fast is the muscles stretch and contract. In other words, they relax. There's a relaxation to fast bowling, which is why you see someone like Jofra Archer who looks like a Rolls Royce, silky smooth, easy. A lot of the West Indian greats were just smooth and silk. They looked like they weren't putting in any effort. They looked effortless. When we see Haris Rauf bowl and some of the other bowlers, they're almost like they're gritting their teeth and they're trying to force the ball down the end. When that happens, you start overriding what you've been training all your life. And actually, you need to revert, you need to trust yourself enough to say, this is what I do well. I'm going to rinse and repeat what's got me this far. I think once you start mentally pushing it, I don't mean get excited because we all get excited. I mean, once you start to push it, the problem then is, Saj, if it goes wrong because you got nowhere to go. I mean, anyone can have a blow up. His figures going for 50 in three and a bit overs. It was horrible for him to happen in the final as well. And there could be an argument that maybe they could have potentially moved the bowlers around a bit better so he didn't have to bowl that over, or he wasn't put in that position, or maybe Pakistan could have got some more runs, all of that stuff. But the bottom line with it, as an individual, I think if you try and really try to control everything or try to sometimes it doesn't work for you because it needs to be natural in the sense that you've learned it, you've repeated it, it feels easy, and you've got to back yourself. End of the day, any captain or coach will not blame you if you've got a plan and you stick to it, but the plan doesn't work. That's fine. What they won't have is if you're trying lots of different stuff, you've got no idea what you're doing, and in the end you have a blow up and you lose the game. That's a captain and particularly fans, they won't live with that. But fans will forgive you if you come out and say, I've got this plan, I stuck to it, it didn't work. People will say it's fine, you're human. It's just when I think sometimes you get into those situations, Saj, where you're almost like a rabbit in a car headlights because you don't quite know which way to go with it. And I think, unfortunately, these big ends, particularly against India, I mean, we know what that pressure is like. And yeah, I felt sorry for him. I'll be honest with you.
Ian, always fascinating to hear your views. And as I said at the start of this chat, you've got a lot of fans out there from young lads who want to become fast bowlers, and some guys who are already fast bowlers and listen to these videos for technical help and assistance. So appreciate your time, and I'm sure we'll catch up with you again soon.
Thanks, Saz. Look forward to it. Thanks, mate.